CB8. She served the community board quite ably for 23 years, and I can attest to her capabilities because I also am delighted to be able to have co-chaired the Women and Families Committee with Peggy. But there are many of you who may be on today's Zoom who don't know Peggy. And so I think we should start, Peggy, by you telling us a little bit about your background, how you found out about Community Board 8, and why you decided that you wanted to join.
Well, thank you very much, Gail, and thank you very much for hosting this fun opportunity to talk about CBA and what we're doing, but some of which is together, which I'm delighted. Uh, it's been an eventful and continuing journey here on the community board. The way I got involved was basically through the Carl Schurz Park Association, which is now known as the Carl Schurz Park Conservancy. So I had been and still am an amateur photographer. My husband had encouraged me to display some of my photographs at the annual Gracie Square Art Show, which is sponsored by Carl Schurz. When I applied, I guess it was in the mid 80s, the art show chair told me that all the slots for that year had been filled up, but she asked if I wanted to join their art show committee. So I said, okay, I joined the committee. Um, did that for a number of years. Then I joined the board of the Cultures Park Association and ended up there as their treasurer. Anyway, so the person that had gotten me involved in all of this decided that and her name was Laura Mayer, she decided that she was going to leave the Cultures Park Association and join the community board. So um, she was thinking that maybe that was something that I might want to do. And I was thinking, okay, so that'll have broader horizons than simply the park. So in 2001, I applied but didn't get in. So Laura asked me to become a public member of the Parks Committee. So I did that, and the next year I became a full board member, and it was on from there.
That's terrific. You know, one thing that's very interesting, just now I found out not about your photography skills because we have a CB8 art show and Peggy very graciously takes photos every year. But I didn't realize how many photos you actually take. And so when we have our next art show, we probably should tap you to display some of your photographs because they're really quite amazing. Plus, fortunately, given Peggy's background and understanding arts events, she's been an integral part of the community and helping to guide all of us to understand when it comes to having artists display, whether it's their photographs or their paintings or their ceramics, if they do crafts, how to best maximize it and to be able to really attract additional artists. And also, thank you for that, Peggy. I
Oh, thank
also
you.
wanted to follow up with your comment about having been a public member of the Parks Committee because you also became the co-chair of the Parks Committee for many years. And I think it would be interesting to find out what your challenges were and what successes you were able to realize during your tenure leading the parks effort.
Yeah, so it was quite a eventful. It was about 10 years, or it could have been a dozen years, but we were an active group. I can say that for certainty. What had become clear right away is that the city was in well, the Upper East Side anyway was in a big construction mode and still is. But there was definitely not enough parks and open space to accommodate not only the existing population, but the growing population. So, among the things that we decided to do was to create something that we called the Open Space Initiative. This this involved doing a survey ourselves on the places around the Upper East Side that might be suitable to be turned into parks. And we prepared a list. We also had a forum on the subject, and one of the speakers at the forum had actually done a survey of parkland in the 5 boroughs. And she had reported that the Upper East Side had among the least parkland of any district in all of the 5 boroughs. So we had evidence that the Upper East Side did not have enough parkland. So we really wanted to find opportunities, not only in the possibility of converting open space to parkland, but it had come to our attention that there were certain sites that were actually already parkland that had been privatized. In other words, a private for public entity was operating on them. One of the places was and is Asphalt Green. Another, it was a place under the Queensboro Bridge called the Queensboro Oval Park. And these two places are city parkland. We did for a while try to get more public usage of Asphalt Green. And for a while, we were able to get a small section of it for public basketball play. But we wanted to be able to have all of the 1.2 acres of the Queensboro Oval converted back to parkland, which it had once been. And so we started a campaign and passed resolutions and to have the Queensboro Oval returned to the public. And the deadline that we were facing was that the city's 10-year contract with the Sutton Tennis Club that was occupying the space was about to expire. So we asked the city, we even had a rally in June of 2016 to try to get the city to return the land to the public. This did not work. And so the city went ahead and signed a 10-year contract, another contract with Sutton Oval. What did happen is that there was negotiations over it, and it was decided that for 5 months of the summer, 6 of the courts at the Sutton Tennis Center could be available for public usage. But the interesting thing was that this was tennis, and why we had one of the reasons we had championed returning the parkland to the public was that baseball teams, which had formerly used this space, wanted the space back, and they were helping us with our campaign. In fact, there was a time, and we have this photo, when Joe DiMaggio used the space for baseball. I don't know how regularly, but I have a photo of him playing
Really?
baseball at the Oval. Anyway, so yeah, they got the the public got part-time availability for tennis, but no availability for the baseball players. So, um, and we worked on a few other projects. For a short time, we got Hunter College to open up one of its spaces on 68th Street for public use. Um, so it was quite a campaign. I think what what really came out of it more than any one park or any one success or failure was this concept that we really have to have more open space, and this is a necessity with more of a necessity with each passing day as the city gets more and more and more built up, including and perhaps especially our neighborhood where the density already was intense and keeps getting denser. And gets to this whole quality of life issue that I think is so important to put more focus on, which is, you can get an apartment maybe if you can afford it, but what do you do after that? I mean, if you have kids, where do they play? If you have if you need more garbage pickup, how do you get that? How do you preserve the quality of your neighborhood? And that's been one of my mantras. But parkland is has been a focus of mine.
And we're so glad that you have advocated the way you have over the years for trying to secure more green space, because it seems to me is unless you're really being outspoken about it and advocating for it, you kind of can't give up. And I know the current parks co-chairs are trying to follow in your footsteps to do the same type of outreach, work closely with the Parks Department. And we can understand even with the Oval, because the city, once again, when you look at the Parks Department budget, it's very limited. So I think they're also looking at other ways to raise revenue, but it's kind of a push-pull. And so the more that we can secure green space, and you're right about the density of the Upper East Side, because it is the densest neighborhood in the entire United States.
Yeah.
So thank goodness that you were, undertaking those types of initiatives. With that thought, what are the challenges that you saw facing Community Board 8 when you first joined, to the challenges that are now in front of the Community Board?
Well, I think some of them for as long as I've been on the board, um, when we annually identified the three biggest issues facing the community, affordable housing was always and remains number one. Um, that that hasn't changed. Sometimes there's been more emphasis on improvement in education, more call for more schools. But I think these days, a big focus of the community board has been about related basically to construction and expansion of buildings and uh, whether communities can tolerate that and how much expansion should we allow for the growing uh, girth of hospitals and tall buildings, but the whole look and feel of the neighborhood has changed, and it started before I joined the board, but it continues, and it has impact on the kinds of issues that come up before the board. For example, even into the 80s, the Upper East Side was much more neighborhoody. We had, for example, in the 70s, we had the uh, the the Czechoslovakian neighborhood, and above that was the Hungarian neighborhood, and above that was the German neighborhood, and these various um, groups had their own restaurants. Sometimes they had shops relating to them. I remember the Hungarian travel agency that was near where I lived, and they had quite a they gave out a feeling of belonging to a section of town. And Germantown, which is in the 80s, also known as Yorkville, they had these charming restaurants that some may remember, Cafe Geiger or Klein and Dory, and with the the accordions going around the restaurant playing as you ate in a real old world charm. And that has much of that, but not all of it, but much of that has disappeared. And it's been replaced by um, chain stores, tall buildings,
Mhm.
expanding institutions, and creating more of a generic feel rather than a neighborhoody feel. So the way this plays out in the community board, from my observation, is that there's, as I said before, that there's much more of consternation over the size of a growing hospital or the size of tall buildings and whether or not the neighbors are going to be subjected to long-term noise and pollution from construction. And so that has become a big focal point among people on the community board. But I must say, I really do think that we do need to focus a little more on quality of life issues. The biggest one, I think, that needs much more attention is the problem of bikes, especially e-bikes, creating a bit of a danger. I say that as an owner of two bikes, standard, typical bikes, not
Mhm.
e-bikes. So I am sympathetic to the interests of bike riders, but nowadays you can't cross the street
Mhm.
lest you do a juggling act or a little dance around the e-bikers. The problem about e-bikers is that they will not follow the traffic laws. If they did, as far as I know, there wouldn't be that much of a problem, but many of them don't. And so I do think it's created a danger in the neighborhood that does need a lot more addressing. I also think that we need more attention to sanitation, um, starting with more garbage pickup. Um, eh, and I think in general, we ought to be thinking about the quality of our air and open space and issues that make it a livable place. Um, there's been so much talk in the latest mayoral campaign about we want to keep more families in the city, which of course we do, and we want to make it a place where you can raise children, not just leave if you know do have a family, and if that's what we want, which um, apparently we do, we have to make it livable for people. Otherwise, it's not enough just to have an affordable, 4 square walls. You need
Mhm.
much more to want to keep people in New York City. So, so that is something, and those are some of the issues that have changed. I mean, above all, this e-bike issue is something that is a much newer issue for communities. And I know that the e-bike problem is not unique to the Upper East Side. I talk to people in Brooklyn and Queens, and they can't cross the street either.
Mhm.
So I I I hope there's more attention to that issue.
It makes sense, certainly on the community board. From my perspective, you see board members that are very pro bikes, those that may be less so. But I think there's almost a misunderstanding because I believe that almost everybody on the board is in favor of bikes, but you're completely correct when it comes to e-bikes. Also, they're not licensed. So you'll see them not just turning the corner going in the wrong direction, but I know a couple of days ago, I was just walking down Lexington toward Lexington, and there was an e-bike on the sidewalk who swished right by, and you could almost feel the air coming. You can't hear them. So
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to get out of the way. And if they're not being careful, then, a major accident could occur, and it happens more frequently than we would like. Also, when it comes to the quality of life in general, do you have any thoughts as to how we can also kind of advocate within the community board to recognize that even if you have all these tall developments, that the housing will not necessarily be affordable, and in addition to that, all the rest of the infrastructure, having an adequate number of classroom seats, having appropriate sewers and others to be able to really have your entire environment be able to handle these tall structures, and then not having air and light, how that impacts people psychologically.
Yeah, and the biggest problem is that in the Upper East Side, New York City generally is under construction. Everywhere you look is
Mhm.
under construction. And the Upper East Side is among the probably busiest areas as far as I can turn about see in terms of buildings going up. But how many unaffordable buildings can you put up? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to put up lots and lots and lots of buildings that you you need three or four roommates to be able to afford to get one unit. I just don't see. I think the new administration is going to have to do something about rethinking giving permits to developers who are putting up things we don't need.
Mhm.
We need affordable housing, but we're not getting it on the Upper East Side. And I understand all the reasons and how expensive the land is, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the reasons, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. We're not getting what we need in terms of the housing that's going up. And to tell developers, okay, you can build up to the, ozone layer, as long as you have 20% of the units affordable. It makes no sense to build gigantic buildings that only have that much affordable living space in them. So this all this permits to put up whatever you want really needs to be thought through in terms of in terms of practicality.
Mhm.
So that would be my thought. I just hope that the new administration does think that just willy-nilly building is not appropriate and that there should be and there needs to be an urban plan for this. Why aren't we getting the urban plan that we need? Other cities around America have an urban plan. Here it's just grab the land and throw something up. I'm
Mhm.
sorry that that is the case, but it is the case, and hopefully the new mayor will want an urban plan.
That's a very good suggestion. You also co-chair the communications committee, and we know that community boards are really well-kept secrets. So many people don't understand that there are community boards, the fact that they are a small city agency, and that they are the advocates for the neighborhood and for their issues. And I'd be really interested because you have a journalism and marketing background as a co-chair of the committee, what your thoughts are in order to be able to reach out to more of our constituents in the neighborhood to make them aware of the board and how we would like to help the community.
Yeah, so the committee has two new outreach efforts that have are pretty much up and running, sort of up
Mhm.
and running. One is this idea that members will go out to organizations and at the organization's meetings and give a little just presentation about how we can all work together and what are your issues and how do we address them. But we also have launched another effort, and actually, it's kind of starting with the Parks Committee, but I'll get back to that in a second. Um, it entails right publicizing the specific projects that the various committees are doing um, in order to present to the public why they should be interested in the community board and what we're doing that hooks them in, that gives them a reason to do it. This has been going on through the Arts Committee and the semi-annual art shows, and these are very popular and giving people an opportunity to present their art or to shop for art or
Mhm.
to just have a nice outing to see the art and making people thus aware of one of the things that the community board does. So we think that this is very important to publicize the other important initiatives that the various committees are doing, because committee work is the heart of what the community board is. And so it's important to make the public aware of what we're doing, make it much more visible. With the Parks Committee, sorry, so we that we've created a flyer, and the Parks Committee at its January 8th meeting is going to be having a session solely devoted to the renovation of Rupert Park. And so it's going to encourage public input. So a flyer has been presented that hopefully will be widely distributed through the community board on social media, etc., to make the public as aware as possible that this program on Zoom is looking for their input about what they want to see done with Rupert Park. So I think this is an exciting start, and our women's committee will be publicizing our January 22nd meeting about childcare and what our community wants to see done for expanded affordable childcare in the city and on the Upper East Side. So we would certainly want public input for that, and it's another example of how we want the public to know what we're doing.
Mhm.
So the more the theory has been the more the public knows about what we're doing, the more we can hopefully draw them in, get their participation, um, and have it a even richer community. So
Well, since
that,
you raised our Women and Families Committee, would you like to kind of explain the types of initiatives that we've undertaken so that people are aware of the fact that this is not just a female issue, that we're dealing with family issues that impact most of the Upper East Side community?
yeah. So this committee sort of came out of really sort of the Me Too movement, in a sense that I guess we knew that women's rights had not been fully attained, but the Me Too movement was put it in our face. And so it became, it felt necessary to address this. So the way the committee kind of has been formulated, and a lot of what we'll do, and we'll talk about the specifics in a second, but overall, a lot of what we do focuses on what we might call financial or economic issues, and uh, the cost of elder care, the cost of child care. We even had, taking this a step further, we even had a program on AI and is it going to take away your job? But we really want to get at what people in the community are facing on some of their economic issues. In fact, that it was your good idea during the lockdown to create a report on places where people, with everything locked down, where could people get food if they can't afford it? What pantries are available where that they could access to get food? And so some of the other issues
Mhm.
we've dealt with abortion rights, we've dealt with the abortion pill and its restrictions, we've dealt with domestic violence, um, and uh, Social Security as well. And so we've covered a gamut of often financial or business or economic issues that people are facing in the community, with an emphasis on women, but men too, children.
Okay.
We uh, we got them all covered here.
Well, and Peggy, because you have a financial background, you've been a financial journalist, and you also have written a book helping women to understand, particularly if they're single, how they plan for their future and how to spend their money appropriately and what type of vehicles to use when they're planning for their future. And I think that that particular mindset I have found to be very useful because I might look at some of the programs and the importance of things that we're discussing, but I think you've always kind of taken it down, with rare exception, to the bottom line. How much does this cost? And even though we're going to be addressing childcare and the childcare cost and programs on the 22nd of January, we've had two other forums dealing with child care cost and issues in the past, and we're able to bring in expert speakers. We've been very fortunate. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of research, but our feeling has always been that if we want to do a program, we want to do it the right way and make sure that the resources are there when we're having those discussions. And I know I've been very pleased, and I think you have as well, with our programs. And we hope people will continue to tune in and come to our committee meetings.
Yeah, and Uh, let's mention the best attended one was on the cost of elder care.
Mhm.
And I mean, that is such a huge problem. And uh, people don't know what to do. Even if they know what the options are, they still don't know w- what the best solution is. It's a terrible problem. Whatever anybody can do to help is greatly appreciated. It's one of these really thorny issues where you don't know what, you don't know how to avoid making a mistake. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. What does mom or dad really want? It is such an emotional uh, issue, but on top of the emotional issue is the financial issue. And I mean, I wish the nation at large could come up with a better solution. There is no
Mhm.
real solution to dealing with elder care and how you even plan for it. You don't know what is coming on down the line. Um, maybe we can even revisit that because it's just such a problem for Americans generally, and the for the elders themselves, for their children, for the whole family. It's excruciating.
Makes me think that it is time to kind of look at another forum on elder care this year.
Yeah.
Switching to another topic, as you know, by the end of next year, term limits will be in place, and board members who have been volunteers for decades, such as yourself, with such expertise and knowledge and contributions, will be term limited and off the board. I know we're losing something like 40% of our board members, but it's all at once. Fortunately, we could lose 70% if indeed everybody went out at the same time, but there's been a little bit of flexibility. But basically, at over a third of the board members who are all able volunteers will no longer serve. What are your views about term limits? And do you think that it was a wise decision or not?
I'm going to be controversial and say I think that our board should take upon it to ask the city council to repeal the term limits provision. And I say that not to save you or I, but, but because it never made any sense to me. The reason, well, there's a few reasons why it doesn't make sense and isn't, in my opinion, appropriate. Basic issue is that we are volunteers. We are not paid city employees. We are not paid elected officials. We are volunteers who are trying to do something for our community. And to tell people who want to help that their services aren't required, or that, okay, that's enough, let push you out. I mean, that's wrong and it sends the wrong message. And I really, instead of being pushed out, I think we should be applauded, to be honest with you. But anyway, when I look at Community Board 8 as an example, I see that there's no need for term limits. We have plenty of turnover, giving opportunities galore to people who want to be on the board. And I say that my evidence is that there's only 3 other people out of 50 on the board who have been on the board as long as I have. So therefore, the turnover has been rather noticeable.
Interesting. Well, I guess also given the fact that as a committee co-chair or attending committee meetings, attending land use meetings, full board meetings, several evenings a week are devoted to going to these meetings. And I think sometimes people join the board and they don't realize how intensive it is as far as a delegation of their time. And so they tend to not be able to stay on the board, or they start to miss a few meetings and then realize that they are not going to apply to be reappointed. But there are some really outstanding board members, and you've seen them over the years. Is there any one or two that you particularly admire who have been on the board for a long period of time?
Yes, and I'm going to start with a former chair, Alita Camp. And I think she deserves special kudos because she created the Arts Committee initially to provide a place for artists to show their work outdoors during the pandemic. It evolved into a very popular semi-annual art show that draws attention to the work of the community board, as well as giving an opportunity to artists to display their work. But it's an example of a very visible example of what the community board um, is trying to do to for our residents. And so, as I had said earlier, we're going to try to make more of the work of the community board more apparent. But Lita deserves um, the laurels for really, doing something that has great visibility. I also want to mention Elizabeth Ashby and also a former board member, Elaine Walsh, who have promoted the concept of special zoning districts. In one case, that would limit the heights of new buildings along York First, Second, and Third Avenues to enhance livability, but also, with the idea that you don't want to keep ripping down the affordable housing that we have on the Upper East Side. And so, I mean, I really think people that are taking the initiative to try to preserve what we have in our neighborhood is so important. We were talking earlier about the ethnic neighborhoods we used to have, and I think a lot of us really would like to feel like we live in neighborhoods and not just a blur of um, you know, glass and chrome or glass and sandstone colored buildings that are so uh, undistinctive. But much more important than what they look like is that we don't want people blocking our air, our space, our light,
Mhm.
taking away open space, etc. I mean, I've already harped on livability, but it all
Important.
feeds into the concept of livability. So with Elizabeth and Elaine taking on that project and other people also, I think it's a real noble effort, and I personally would like to see more of that.
Well, I agree with you. I think that Elizabeth Ashby is a phenom. She also was responsible for the height limits on Fifth, on Madison, on Park, and Lexington. And I think we would have had many more super talls had she not gotten that legislation passed. And even with trying to have special zoning districts for Third, Second, First, and York, some of the problems really came with the fact that there were so many developers and advocates for these tall buildings, so that city planning was not willing to really address this, but it was certainly saving the tenements, which were the more affordable walk-ups, but it was also saving the retail, the mom and pops
Yeah.
that were in those particular walk-ups. So that's something else that is a little sad, but you never know with the next administration and the next planning department what the balance might be and if there's a way of preserving the existing affordable housing.
Just as a thought about, the evolution of our community, it is just interesting looking back at the effect of subway service on
Hmm.
the Upper East Side. And I say that because, this was a not heavily low-rise community before the L, the Third Avenue L came down, and that was in 1955. And when the L came down, suddenly people, oh my goodness, there's an Upper East Side. They discovered the Upper East Side. And after that, we got a few more bigger buildings, but it had been ethnic, it had been low rise, it had been neighborhoody, and other than I guess Fifth Avenue and Madison and Park, it wasn't chic. So down came the Third Avenue L, and oops, we discovered there's an Upper East Side. And then the next thing that happened was the Second Avenue subway debuts. All of a sudden, developers, oh my goodness, look at this. And so along came the heavy-handed developers, and thus the city, especially, are related to areas around the Second Avenue subway, are under mass reconstruction. And and I think to myself, it is phenomenal just to see what happens when a subway or a bus service enters or doesn't enter your community, and how the metamorphosis
Hmm.
that results from this one phenomenon. But it all, the East Side kind of more or less started with the elimination of the Third Avenue L.
That's very interesting. That I didn't know. Well, during your tenure, there have been so many different concerns that the board has addressed. Can you think of one or two where the board was very effective in moving towards solutions of the problems that were addressed?
Well, the biggest one, again, the Second Avenue subway was in the 23 years that I have been on the board, that has been the single biggest and most influential issue. I happen to have been on the Second Avenue task force, and it was for a long time. And most of the time, it was headed by Barry Schneider, who was very instrumental in promoting it and seeing it through. And it it not only was the incentive to get more developers around it, but much more importantly, it involved a lot of things you might not think about off the top of your head. Which trees had to come down, which trees and how many would be replanted afterwards, what kind of lighting do we want? And that was actually quite controversial. And um, what why was that our committee wanted different kind of lighting than the city was willing to give us. The city said, you're going to get these particular lights because we bought them in bulk. So so we there was no dissuading them. And so there were so many separate individual um, tangents of the bigger project that had to be addressed. And so and it also was something that was encompassing the whole community from 63rd Street to 96th Street. And so it was it was a monumental project, and it brought forth tremendous change in the community. And as I said before, this change is continuing.
Well,
So
you,
so that was a big deal. And I want to say thank you to Barry Schneider for all his leadership. He really it was it was quite a task juggling the project itself, dealing with the city, state, and feds, and but the community and the community's um, rather pointed interests that nobody was shy about vocalizing, including me, I must say. But it it must have kept him up nights.
can
But
imagine. Well, you've
but
mentioned so many of the issues that took place during your tenure. putting on your crystal ball, touching it, what do you think the future concerns might be, and what would your wish list be for the board to basically address?
Well, apart from quality of life, which it's
Hmm.
very, very important, and very encompassing, technology is rolling along full steam, and that will affect all of us in various ways. The community board, certainly, it has brought changes to the community board. But what I should I say, worry about is it's the effect on employment. And I say that because the Upper East Side is expensive place to live. What if AI really cuts heavily into jobs, the economy? So I think that is something that sounds like a financial issue. It doesn't sound like something that ought to be of concern, but it should be of concern to our board because I think that looking forward, employment is going to be even create even more affordability issues than we even think about today. And so I mean, you and I, again, we during the pandemic, we did what we could to provide information about food pantries when everything was shut down. I think the community board is going to have to grapple with the broad and seemingly permanent effects of AI on employment, on society, even how the community board works. So,
That
so
makes sense.
that's the big thing out there. And I don't think there's enough attention to this yet, although states are trying to um, focus on the impact of AI, but the federal government does not seem to want them to do so. So I think it's going to end up being a locally focused issue for a while.
That makes sense. Do you think that when you look at the recruitment, the way board members are recruited today versus recruitments in the past, that there should be more emphasis on background skill sets that the potential new board member brings to the community board in order to have a more robust roster of people with different skill sets, or do you think that we do pretty well as is?
I think it's probably a necessity to keep the board as broadly um, representative as possible. Um, uh, and yeah, skill sets. I remember the year that I didn't get into the board. The people were telling me that they wanted an architect and that the board needed an architect. Well, sure, they did. But the point is that it was clear back then that there were um, certain missing links that needed to be filled. But I think you do have to think broadly, especially in our fast changing world, that I think there's and people with a technological background would be very helpful to have people with financial background, writers, artists. I do think that you can't speak for our community uh, and be the voice of our community if you don't replicate, in some ways, our community. So I do think that would is important to keep in mind when people are selecting uh, new new membership, and so we'll see. I hope they keep that in mind.
certainly makes sense. I have a million more questions to ask you, but our time is just about up.
So,
So I wanted to thank you so much for doing this. It's
thank
just been
you.
such a pleasure. And I'll certainly speak to you before our meeting on January 22nd.
Yes, and thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and for this in-depth discussion that has been really enjoyable. So thank you very much.